We are live. I'm Caleb Johnston.
I'm Joel Furchess.
And I'm Clinton Wilcox.
Welcome to the show. Today we are going to be doing a live discussion on a award show video that has made the rounds due to some of the content, and it does have some apologetics significance. So, I'm glad to have Clinton here, as he is the expert in this area. So I'm sure he's going to provide us some valuable insights. And then
I will do my best.
Clinton, you've been on a couple of mentionable shows, but you haven't really flexed the muscles of your particular area of expertise yet.
That's true. I guess
I'll get that opportunity tonight. Yeah, for sure. All right. So anything new this particular week? Anybody wanted to throw out there, or news or upcoming stuff before we kind of dive in?
Well, there's new information for me. I'm back in school working towards my PhD, but, that only tangentially relates to the unmentionables.
Well, I mean, that is pretty significant in the long run, at least.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working towards my field, which is the behavior analysis, which is kind of what I bring to the shows on a regular basis. So, yeah, in that way, it relates to the mentionables.
Wow, I thought yours was gender studies or something,
That's my minor.
Okay, fair enough. I kid. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. So just by a show of hands, this is the Michelle Williams clip from the Golden Globes acceptance speech. We'll skip over the whole Ricky Gervais opening monologue debacle that had everybody.
Oh, that's the part, though.
I know. It was very entertaining. Probably one of the better things I've heard him speak on.
Ricky Gervais is typically not a friend of ours.
Right.
No, he's got some. Oddly enough, he's got some really bad arguments. That's one thing I hear. So much of more over the last couple of years is it's went from new atheists like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris being the spokespeople for why somebody deconverted, to being people like George Carlin, Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
They quote a lot of comedians as being the main reason for their deconversion. I actually found a video this week where the whole George Carlin bit on God was we talked on our last episode, Joel, about kind of how everybody has this one kind of thing that triggers the final kind of step in their deconversion, and he went right through kind of the way we discussed, but then his deconversion moment was this George Carlin video.
Yeah, well, when I discussed it, the way I see the trigger is that which gives them permission to start questioning. It seems as if there's this tension or pressure that builds up, and you can think of the trigger as the needle that pops the balloon, after which they start the whole deconversion career. And I'm borrowing language from conversion studies at this point. But yeah, so the trigger doesn't have to be something really significant. And typically when I've looked at them, they're not. There's some pretty basic questions, but it's that little thing that gives them permission to start spewing all their doubts around everywhere.
Yep. and that was the story here. It's another video we'll have to pull up and watch sometime, because it was interesting in terms of the way it kind of stepped along, same way as the whole video we looked at last time.
Yep.
So fun stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Like they say, if you get your philosophy from comedians, don't be surprised if it's a joke.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back
that.
And watch our YouTube channel, I did a video where I just took tiny little clips that, somebody had compiled a video of 20 little clips that were 10-second clips of some atheist, spewing some kind of quippy little argument out there, and I would show the clip, and then I would respond to it with a quick soundbite and go back and forth. And most of the ones in that series were comedians, including Carlin a couple of times, and I had to kind of edit him because he's NSFW, if you will.
Right.
Yeah, he was very colorful.
Yep.
All right, so this one borders on getting colorful at a few times, depending on if you get the gist of what she's saying. But we'll go ahead and kind of dive into this. Just, I'll stop at a few points along the way that I think are kind of meaningful to stop at and kind of discuss as we go through. But, feel free to jump in and interject at any point if you want me to pause the video and touch on something.
All right. Play it slow, and then we can stop and explain the innuendo to Clinton.
All right.
All right. Okay, so here we go.
So much family and to the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. When you put this in someone's hands, you're acknowledging the choices that they make as an actor, moment by moment, scene by scene, day by day, but you're also acknowledging the choices they make as a person, the education they pursued, the training they sought, the hours they put in. I'm grateful for the acknowledgement.
Right away, her statements are a train wreck. I don't watch these award shows because it's just Hollywood elites giving other Hollywood elites a pat on the back for stuff that they do.
Sure, a pat on the back.
Well, yeah, among other things. But yeah, giving someone an award does not affirm all of the choices that they make. That's just kind of a silly thing to say. When we look back on a lot of moral reformers, they weren't always the most morally upstanding people in all situations. But it's still appropriate to affirm them for the work that they did, which doesn't mean you have to affirm every single choice that they've ever made. That's just a silly thing to say.
Right. I mean, even I think a good example is as a parent, I affirm a lot of choices my kids make, a lot of their accomplishments, but just because I'm affirming them in one thing, what they did good today for their sibling, doesn't mean I'm affirming every time that they've punched their sibling in the face.
Right.
It just goes without saying.
By the way, I actually have no idea who Michelle Williams is. So what has she been in?
Oh boy, you had to ask that question. Let's find out real quick. We are live, so I was kind of embarrassed in the same way. First saw her, and I looked it up, and then it completely slipped my mind. Well, I was, because I'm like, wait, who is this person, and why are they getting an award at this point? Because I've never heard of them, and I'm fairly up on entertainment for the most part. So if it had been a big name, it kind of surprises me that I didn't know it. All right. So here we go. We're going to find out what all she has been in.
She was receiving the award for some kind of television series she did on a streaming service.
Yeah, so I've got her full history here. Maybe we'll recognize something that she's been in if it wants to load here. So what I've got here is...
While you pause, just a quick response to your point, Clinton. It's clear that she's just saying something to segue into the point she's really trying to make. She's making some kind of thin, segue from receiving the award into the sermon she's about to pitch.
Right.
So I'm not sure a whole lot of thought was put into that.
Yeah, so it looks like the TV show that was awarded here is Fosse Verdon. Okay, still never heard of that. She was in Venom, The Greatest Showman, Manchester by the Sea, Oz the Great and Powerful, Brokeback Mountain's in there.
Yeah, the only one of those the only one of those I would have seen is Venom, but I actually haven't seen Venom because I've heard a lot of real negative reactions to it.
It wasn't awful. If you went in not expecting much, it was okay. If you went in expecting a lot, I'm sure it would be a disappointment.
Why would you pay $8 or $10 to go see a movie if you're not expecting much?
Exactly. That's why I waited until I could see it for free.
Right.
Oh, you're one of those.
Now, hey, perfectly legal services I've paid for that I was able to see it on.
Oh, you're one of those.
Yeah. I also was on Dawson's Creek back in the early 2000s.
Really?
Apparently so.
She's 39, so yeah, she would have been in her tweens or teens back then.
Yeah, okay, so no wonder I don't recognize her. I haven't seen anything she's been in.
Yeah. All right, we will carry on a little bit here.
Acknowledgement of the choices I've made, and I'm also grateful to have lived at a moment in our society where choice exists, because as women and as girls, things can happen to our bodies that are not our choice.
All right, so what she's trying to say there, Clinton, is that girls can do it and then maybe get pregnant.
Yeah, but she apparently doesn't think that that women can choose to have sex. I mean,
no, she says things can happen to our body. That has nothing to do with the sex. It has everything to do with the sex. But
yeah, it does. Sex makes babies, and so this is one of the ways that pro-choice people tend to obfuscate the issue. Is that number one, she says she's glad to live in a time in our society where choice is available. Well, all sorts of choices have always been available. Yeah, 1973 made abortion legal, but that wasn't when women finally were able to choose things. They could choose things for a long time before that. But also, they talk about pregnancy as if it's just something that happens to them. They'll say, "Oh, I had sex, but I didn't choose to get pregnant." Well, you did choose to have sex, and sex leads to pregnancy. Ergo, you chose to get pregnant because you chose to have sex, or at the very least, you consented to the possibility of getting pregnant. You can't just have sex consensually and then say, "Oh, I never chose. It wasn't my choice to get pregnant." Well, you did have a choice to perform the act that got you pregnant. So that's just more obfuscation from pro-choice people.
What I'll say in response to that is it appears to me as if society now sees sex as, just a natural thing that is going to happen, and it has very little to do with it. It's like the wind blowing or, the tide coming in. It's just a natural thing in nature that's going to absolutely happen. And we have to do something about that in order to keep it, pregnancy from also occurring. So one of the things you'll hear them say a great deal is education. You've really got to press the education. And if you educate young people enough, then you eliminate pregnancy, because the sex is going to happen. So you got to educate them about how to do it.
Yeah, doesn't that kind of take choice out of the equation, though? Because, they're obsessed with choice. They want to have the choice to be able to have an abortion or not. But if you're going to say that sex is something that just happens, it's just going to happen anyway, well, that negates any sort of responsibility, because, pregnancy is not the only thing that can result from having sex. You can get an STD. Well, if a woman consents to having sex, is she responsible for contracting an STD? It seems like she would be. All things being equal, obviously, like if the guy she had sex with hid it from her, then obviously she's not at fault for it. But if she had sex in full knowledge that the guy she's having sex with has an STD, then it seems like she has responsibility for the fact that she contracted it, even though she didn't choose to contract the STD. She still consented to the act that led to her contracting it. So it's the same kind of thing here. It's it's not something that just happens. It's something that we can choose. And so there is this idea now that you can have sex without getting pregnant, and this is what the contraceptive mentality has led to. In that now that contraceptives have been legalized and are pushed by even Protestant churches now, but by the government and by everyone else. Now, procreation has actually separated the idea of sex from getting pregnant. So now sex is no longer seen as the act that's intrinsically connected to pregnancy. Now, sex and pregnancy are two different things, because as long as you can use contraception, you're trying to prevent pregnancy. So now it's seen that sex no longer leads to pregnancy because of contraceptives. And so this contraceptive mentality has caused people to have some irrational ideas about sex. They don't understand how the cause and effect relationship works between sex and pregnancy.
But I think that in saying that, you're falling into this idea that they have that you're trying to control their body. To even suggest that there's a link between sex and pregnancy is your attempt to control their body, because, you can just kind of do away with whatever occurs from pregnancy.
No, it's not an attempt to control their body per se. It's because there's a sense in which it does involve some control of the body, but it's not an immoral control of the body, because obviously the government does tell us some things that we can do with our body. They say that if you don't drive with a seatbelt, for example, you'll get a ticket. Or in certain situations, like with men, they'll actually draft you into the army if they need additional soldiers. So this idea that the government can't tell anyone what to do with their bodies is a false idea. And in the situation of pregnancy, are observing that nature has established this cause and effect relationship between sex and pregnancy is not our attempt or our desire to control women's bodies. It's merely an observation that with sex comes procreation. It's a cause and effect relationship. If you have sex, you have then basically performed the act that gets you pregnant. And so now we're not trying to control women's bodies in the sense that we just want women to be pregnant and that's all we want. It's that we recognize that what's growing inside the woman's womb is a human being. And if we hold to the view that it is immoral to intentionally kill an innocent human being, well, that fact doesn't change just based on where the human being is located. So just because the human being is in the womb doesn't mean that this idea that it's wrong to intentionally kill a human being suddenly goes out the window. It's still immoral, regardless of where that human being is located.
Well, and the final thing that I'd say is that it really seems to me as if we've approached a point in society where we see sex as a fundamental, basic human right, the same as, say, a warm meal or a roof over your head. And nothing drives that further home to me than the incel movement. You familiar with that?
I am.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that you could be protesting the fact that you're an involuntary celibate, is, at core, this idea that sex is a fundamental human right and they're being robbed of a human right.
Yeah. See, I have no problem considering sex to be a fundamental human right, because there's an innate need in all of us to have that closeness, to have sex, and sex is how the human race propagates. If everybody just immediately stopped having sex, the human race would never continue, unless we suddenly just all did it artificially in the lab, because there's that technology now. But we have to understand that there's a difference between a positive right and a negative right if we're going to talk about sex as a concept of a human right. A positive right is a right that someone else is obligated to provide for you. So in the United States, our Constitution considers the right to an attorney to be a positive right, because if you're going to be sued or you have the possibility of going to jail, the government will provide an attorney for you if you cannot afford one. So the right to an attorney is considered a positive right. But then there are also negative rights, which is not that anyone has an obligation to provide it for you, but they do have an obligation obligation to stop you from obtaining it. And so, for example, the right to life, we would view as a negative right. No one is obligated to provide me life. In fact, it kind of doesn't even make any sense to say that someone is obligated to provide me a life because I'm already alive. And I was kind of alive against my will, certainly. But we view the right to life as a negative right in that it is immoral for anyone to remove my life from me. It's immoral for anyone to kill me unjustly. And now, if we say that it's a right, even considering the difference between a positive and a negative right, we still have to understand that no rights are absolute. And so, just saying that sex is a negative right means that I have no right to prevent someone else from obtaining sex if they want to have sex, but that doesn't then give them carte blanche to go out and just force someone to have sex with them, because that would be immoral. That would be an unjust treatment of another person. You'd be treating that person as merely a means to an end, that is sexual gratification. So, like I said, I have no problem viewing sex as a human right, because it's the way we procreate, and there's that innate natural desire for that. But we have to understand the concept of rights properly if we're going to talk about sex in the context of a discussion of rights.
And
All right.
And I think you make a very good philosophical point there on a little bit more just, I guess, basic contradiction point as well is part of some of the new gender definitions we're seeing nowadays. One of the LGBTQA, the A is often, I'm told, for asexual. So to describe sex as a right of every individual, but then you have asexual individuals who would, reject and not actually want this right as well. If you're looking at both of these things from a biological standpoint, as is often the case, then you're beginning to run into a contradiction there as well. Last thing I'll kind of say about it as well, I find it interesting, having watched this a couple times now, just her choice of words is very interesting. At some point, she seems to be as vague as possible, while others, it's leaning far towards the other side. It's like she's holding back from using certain words, and I think that creates some of those language problems we were talking about when we first stopped this clip as well.
Yeah, you have to be really careful, and that's why I'm so adamant in teaching pro-life people how to think well. Not just knowing the good arguments, but being able to recognize bad arguments and recognize the for lack of a better word, the illegal moves that pro-choice people do in trying to defend abortion. Because number one, abortion is just indefensible. It's defending killing an innocent human child, essentially. And so the only way, and this isn't talking about academics. Academics obviously have very sophisticated arguments that require a different level of argumentation to respond to. But just at the street level, one of the ways that they try and argue for their position on abortion is by misusing language. And so, that's like number one, they don't talk about how abortion kills a human being, because it is, and everybody kind of innately understands that. So they just really focus on that word choice. If you oppose abortion, you're anti-choice. You're not anti-killing a human being, because then they'll say, oh, you're not just, you're not pro-life, you're just pro-fetus, or you're pro-birth, or something like that. And so that's one of the ways that they defend their stance on abortion, is that they'll just use terms incorrectly. Because as it's been said, whoever defines the terms wins the debate. And so they know that if they focus on the fact that abortion kills a human being, they'll never win the argument. So they have to redefine the terms of the debate in order to try and defend their position.
You seem to know a lot about this, Clinton. I don't know if all our viewers are familiar with your background. Would you like to share a little bit about why you're so knowledgeable on this subject?
Sure, I've done a little bit of reading about it. I've been involved in the pro-life movement now for roughly 10 years. It kind of all started after I got out of high school and went into college. I took a public speaking course, and one of my speeches had to be on a controversial topic. Back then colleges weren't afraid of engaging controversial ideas. So so I was allowed to do a presentation on the topic of abortion, which is just kind of the topic I chose out of thin air. And as I studied, because I had to present both sides equally, I came to realize what the arguments for the pro-life position were, what the arguments for the pro-choice position were, and the arguments for the pro-life position were just much, much stronger than the pro-choice arguments. And so that's when I really became pro-life at that point. And so from then, I went through a program called Justice for All. I went through a few times, and now I'm a certified speaker and mentor through Justice for All. I also work for Life Training Institute, which is Scott Klusendorf's organization. He wrote a book called The Case for Life, and he's probably the top pro-life speaker in America, or probably even in the world. So I'm really, really fortunate to be able to work for Scott. And if you're not familiar with his work, definitely get familiar if you're interested in learning more about abortion. But from there, I had a couple mentors in the pro-life movement who were able to direct me a bit. But I just kind of branched out now to talk about bioethics as a whole, because a lot of it is very important, and a lot of it are topics that we'll have to deal with at some point in our lives. And so I've, studied the writings of various philosophers: Frank Beckwith, Christopher Kaiser, Patrick Lee, Stephen Schwartz, and then not even just the pro-life philosophers, but the general Thomistic philosophers like Ed Feser, David Oderberg, people like that. And I've come now to have a fundamental grounding to my pro-life views in the Aristotelian Thomistic tradition, which I think has, number one, the best grounding for the pro-life position, but I think it also best accounts for how we view reality as it is. So that's just kind of in a nutshell my journey from not knowing anything about abortion to kind of becoming specializing in abortion and bioethics.
Very nice. Thank you. And I think listeners will love to go back and listen to that again and pick up on some of those references if they care to kind of follow down this same road of research.
Yeah. In fact, I'll just give my email address, clinton@prolifetraining.org. Clinton at prolifetraining.com. I believe it's .com. Yeah,
try both. You'll get it eventually.
No, right, exactly. So if you want, email me, and I can give you some resources. If you're pro-choice, I can give you some pro-life resources that'll challenge your views if you're interested in a little bit of a challenge. Or if you're pro-life, I'll give you some resources to really help you, solidify your views and show you what the best arguments are for abortion, or for the pro-life position, rather.
Fantastic.
I have to be careful how I word that.
I know. After talking about some of these things for so long, it's so easy to insert the wrong term at exactly the wrong place.
Right. Yeah, I always have to really concentrate on what I'm saying to make sure I say it correctly.
Yeah. And you had a pretty big debate on this topic at one point, right? I mean, yeah. I'm sure you've had many debates, but
only a few. I'd love to have more, because I really want to increase my ability to do debates, but I'm actually not really concentrating on debates any longer. I'll have some discussions on the topic, but there are a lot of other more qualified debaters, and so I'm kind of leaving the debating to them. And so I'll have discussions with pro-choice people, and really my niche in the pro-life movement is education. So debating can be fun, but really where I'm best at is in an educational atmosphere, where I'm giving a talk or teaching a class on a particular issue, because that way afterward we can just have like a Q&A with people who agree with me and people who disagree with me. And I'm really more at home in that kind of format than in a debate format, because I'm more of a low-key kind of timid personality kind of person. So really it's not really in my personality to be a great debater. Like Scott Klusendorf is excellent at debating. Mike Adams has debated; he's great. Trent Horn is excellent at debating also. But in the past, I have done a couple of debates. I actually debated Matt Dillahunty on the topic of abortion on my friend Devin and Melissa Palou's podcast, Theology Matters with the Palouse. They brought Matt and myself on to debate the topic of abortion. And so I've done a little bit of debating on it. But for now, I'm more concentrating on the educational aspects of it, teaching classes and giving talks.
Excellent. Well, thanks for giving us that background. And one of our future clips for this program, possibly in the next couple of weeks, will be a Matt Dillahunty clip from his recent debate on Unbelievable. So,
yeah, interestingly, after Matt and I debated, he kind of publicly said, "Okay, I'm not debating abortion any longer." I don't know if that was my doing or
it was all you, man.
Officially, he said it's because he thinks it's a woman's issue and he has no right to speak out on it. But take from that what you will.
Yeah, I would encourage listeners to check it out. I thought it was a very good debate. So.
Well, thank you.
Wait, debate
Melissa was very happy with it too. So,
where did you get a hold of that debate? How could I find that?
I found it. I might have found it on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah, I did a debate with Matt also a couple years ago on end of life issues. That one I don't think went as well.
That's the one I saw. I maybe haven't heard the abortion one yet. So which podcast did you say that was on again?
It was on Theology Matters with the Palouse. And I believe they're on Blog Talk Radio. So if you go to blogtalkradio.com and search for their podcast, you should be able to come up with it. Yeah, and I enjoyed the debate on end of life issues with Matt. That was the first time meeting Matt in person. We both were in, I think it was Houston. We went to the Bible and Beer Consortium to do that debate. And Matt's actually a really nice guy. After everything I've heard about him from other Christians, I was expecting him to kind of be mean, but he was actually very nice, very gracious during the debate. So I really enjoyed our interaction. I think my abortion debate definitely went a lot better than my end of life issues debate. But I've talked about my debate with Matt elsewhere. So you can look at my podcast, Pro Life Thinking, on the blogtalkradio.com website for my post debate thoughts on my end of life debate with Matt Dillahunty. But definitely check out the debates. I'm also very much open to constructive criticism. One of my friends was actually in attendance of that debate with
your hat is stupid
life issues. What's that?
Your hat is stupid.
Oh, well, you're the first person who said that. I generally get a lot of good feedback on my hat. So
I kid.
Okay, all right. Yeah. And he offered a little bit of constructive feedback too. So definitely check those out.
Very cool. All right, we will dive back in.
Were we watching some kind of clip earlier in the show?
We were. We will dive back into that.
All right.
That's all right. We sidetrack a little bit. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's only 2.5 minutes, so we got time.
Yeah, we're already like a third of the way there. So right. I'm gonna go back just a couple seconds so we don't catch anybody mid-sentence here.
Things can happen to our bodies that are not our choice. I've tried my very best to live a life of my own making, and not just a series of events that happened to me, but one that I could stand back and look at and recognize my handwriting all over. Sometimes.
Wait, just a second. Did you guys see that?
You're talking about the guy.
This guy looks. Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah, he looks like he's either got a raging migraine or this is really getting to him one way or another.
Mm. Yeah,
I would probably be face palming at this point too.
Well, yeah, I mean, one thing that we haven't really talked about, but this is on the heels of that, or I think we did mention it at the beginning of that Ricky Gervais intro, in which he basically said, "All of you are just Hollywood elites. Shut up. No one wants to hear your opinion. Just accept your award, thank your God, and be done with it." And here Michelle Williams comes up and gives this speech, this 2.5 minute speech about abortion, obviously not heeding Ricky Gervais's words there.
Nobody thanked God during the ceremony.
Oh, I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I didn't watch all of it either. I've seen clips, and that's been about it. You'll have to fill us in on all the details, Joel.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. We'll carry on after my sidetrack.
Stand back and look at and recognize my handwriting all over, sometimes messy and scrawling, sometimes careful and precise. but one that I had carved with my own hand, and I wouldn't have been able to do this without employing a woman's right to choose.
Okay, so she kind of makes it very clear there what she's actually implying here.
Yeah, there's that word choose again. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's very obvious, and I think all the press afterwards has made it very obvious. What she's saying here is that she had an abortion at some point in her career, and that this wouldn't have been possible without her career as is wouldn't have been possible without having had that abortion.
Yeah, and this is where a number of pro-life people have been taking issue with it, and rightly so, is that, abortion is often portrayed as a feminist ideal, that, they need abortion to be able to compete with men. And so, it empowers them because it gives them a right to choose. Well, the problem is that what she's essentially saying is that without abortion, she would never have been successful as an actress, which is about the least feminist thing you could ever say, because a woman's body is unique in that they gestate children. And so by saying that, number one, by saying that they need abortion to be equal with men, what they're really saying is that the male body is normative. And so they have to become like men in order to succeed in society. And of course, that's a ridiculous thing to believe. And there are a huge number of pro-life women who would disagree with that. Second of all, she's saying that without abortion, she would not be able to succeed in her job. And of course, that's false also, because what she's essentially saying is that in order to succeed, she has to be able to kill her child. And again, that's a position that's just not a feminist position, because women shouldn't have to be able to, or shouldn't have to be forced to kill their children in order to be successful.
If I could sidetrack a bit, based on your statement earlier, I was recently studying the role of gender in conversion and religious conversion. And one of the points made there was when, women in feminist movements were abandoning various religions, for the idea of them being oppressive to women and so forth. There was this point being made that this whole idea of feminism pushes women to be more like men, like you said, which makes the male idea, the male role is the society, therefore women should strive to be more like men, and they felt that to be very unfeminist. And in the issue of conversion, they were talking about how I think this was specifically with Orthodox Judaism, that there's a certain dignity accorded women within Orthodox Judaism, because the men have to act towards women based around their menstrual cycles, and women have a specific operation in the preparation of the Passover meal that only they can do, and certain cleansing rituals at home and so forth. So there is a function that women serve in Orthodox Judaism, and to say that the male function is the superior over the female is very anti-feminine, because it says that the male role is the one that we should all strive for, and they base that as sort of a patriarchal idea.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that the original feminists, the ones fighting for actual women's rights, like the right to vote, the right to own property, etc., were pro-life, because they were actually fighting for women's equality, and they said, considering that women are considered less equal than men, that they're basically considered as not equal persons with men, it would be the height of hubris to then turn around and treat our own children like that. And so, the feminists of today are very far removed from that actual fight for women's rights, and so they have to keep up this charade that their rights are are in jeopardy, essentially. And so abortion is just the latest battlefield that they have to fight, because being far removed from actually being considered as not full persons like the original feminists were, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and women like that. They don't really understand the plight of the original feminists, and the original feminists were pro-life for that reason, because of the oppression that the actual real oppression that they faced.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing this kind of across the board. I think it's really, really obvious in some of the changes with the definitions of gender going on right now, in that you're seeing this erosion of the actual structure to change definitions, make them more flexible, and to just tweak it so we don't have these strong definitions anymore, but a much weaker definition. And I think, it's interesting that abortion is one of those things that destroys a lot of that significant symbolism, because, pregnancy is one of the things that is exclusive to women, and it is a very powerful symbolism associated with that as well. I don't know if either of you are familiar with the story of Betty Crocker, but when they first released the cake mixes, essentially it was, you just add water to these things. That's all you had to do. Add water, throw it in the oven, you make a cake. Well, they wouldn't sell. So they had a bunch of psychologists look at this and kind of analyze what's going on here. And they said, you just have to add some directions to the box. Have them add eggs to the mixture, which weren't actually needed in the mixture to, make the cake the same way. But it was that significant symbolism of, adding a portion to themselves. This was something women found very valuable, is that it didn't feel right to just make something so easy, instead of slaving away at a cake for many hours over the day. So, the psychologists that advised them said, hey, add to the directions, have them add eggs to the mixture. And all of a sudden, it starts flying off the shelves, just because the symbolism was so significant in terms of the value women felt they were bringing to their families by this product. When it was just adding water, they didn't feel it had the value of something to, bring to their family as a gift. And the symbolism of the egg is significant because of its reproductive significance as well. So, to have abortion be such an issue of choice is really one of those things that I think erodes a lot of that significance of, women's role. And that's not to say that's the only thing by any means. Like, you could take any male activity and say the same thing with it, but it does kind of do that same thing of devaluing, the terms of male and female, and masculine and feminine. To devalue these things, it just weakens all the definitions to a point that, we're losing some of that value in terms of what words mean.
Hey, shouldn't we be changing the terminology from a woman's right to choose to the right to choose?
Good point.
Yeah, I suppose so.
All right, we'll continue on here.
All right.
To choose when to have my children and with whom, when I felt supported and able to balance our lives, knowing, as all mothers know, that the scales must and will tip towards our children. Now, I know my choices might look...
Any thoughts on that segment there?
Yeah, she called herself a mother as she was talking about the right to choose.
Well, in the irony of all this, which adds even more here, I have no idea if she had children prior to this, but as of the moment of this award ceremony, she is actually pregnant.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a psychological component which might be of interest to Joel regarding discussions of
Hey,
abortion.
Caleb's a psych guy too.
Oh, okay. Well, there
We
we go.
downplay that, but it's true.
All right. So yeah, there's a psychological component to it. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not well read on psychology, but there's an element of I know, surprising, right? That if when a woman has an abortion, all the arguments in the world can never really convince her that it's the right decision, and so there are a lot of women who many women don't regret the abortion decision right away. They might 5-10 years down the road or late in life, or they may never regret it, but there is a psychological component to it, in that if a woman has an abortion, then in order to justify her own choice, because arguments are not emotionally satisfying, you have to really cultivate the life of the mind in order to find arguments convincing, even though they're not emotionally emotionally motivating, I guess you could say. So if you cultivate the life of the mind, then you can find yourself being motivated by arguments just because they're true. But when it comes to a woman who has an abortion, well, she knows inherently that she just killed her child, essentially. And all the arguments in the world will never make her feel better. So she has to put up these emotional barriers, which make it more difficult to convince her that it was a child that she killed, and to convince her that abortion is wrong because it kills an innocent human being. And so one of the reasons that they obfuscate the matter by confusing terms or by using words in a way that's unique to the abortion issue, but doesn't mean that in any other context, is because they have to convince themselves emotionally that they actually made the right decision.
Yeah. So the first thing that jumps to mind is that I was on the jury for a murder trial one time, and the basic nature of the case was that this guy, he had no friends or family, and he was kind of a desperate, lonely guy, and he had a friend who would manipulate him to do, basically anything he wanted, just because he was his friend. And so basically he and his aunt hired the guy to go kill a family member they wanted offed. And after he did it, his friend texted him and was like, "Yeah, you a stone cold killer, bruh." And he was just trying to make it into a cool thing that he just murdered a guy, just to kind of psychologically justify the thing. But more to the point, though, Caleb, I'm sure you know this as well, that we tend to give reasons for an action after we've already committed the action. And you see this in hypnosis. You can put a post-hypnotic suggestion in a person, and then they'll do whatever it is that the suggestion is. And then their mind will give them a reason why they chose to do that thing. They didn't really choose to. It was just some kind of suggestion that was given to them, and they were following the suggestion, but they're confused. And so their mind immediately fills that blind spot with a reason, and then they're convinced that this is actually the reason that they made the choice to do the thing. And so, our minds tend to try to justify actions, give them purpose and reason after we've committed them. And so people will backtrack things. And, I see this attempt to emotionally justify abortions in sort of glorifying them nowadays.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, I saw on one of the Mentionables posts that one of the commenters who listens to the podcast said, "Oh, you guys probably never interact with any atheists, do you? Because you don't sound like you." I just want to say that I interact with a lot of people, pro-choice and post-abortive. So I've seen this in action. So I've interacted with a lot of these people. So I have some real-world experience in this area as well.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, most of the pro-life, pro-choice engagement I've had some with non-believers, But oddly enough, a lot of the engagement over this topic for me has actually been with other believers who have adopted a pro-choice stance and have attempted to justify it.
Yeah, that's pretty shameful, to be honest. That these are children who are still made in the image of God, and so for a Christian to justify abortion, they're justifying. It's no different. As Christians, we can talk about how it's modern day Molech worship, abortion, because you're basically sacrificing your child for the promise of a better life, and so for a Christian to justify abortion, to justify the killing of someone made in God's image, for a reason to make someone's life better in some way. Now, obviously, there are some rare situations which may justify it, like if her life is in immediate jeopardy. But like in Michelle Williams' situation, she was not justified in having this abortion, and for a Christian to argue that she would be justified is no different than paganism, really. That you're basically saying that it's permissible to sacrifice your child for the promise of a better life, essentially. So a Christian, especially, should not support abortion. And traditionally, the Christian Church has opposed abortion. We can see throughout Scripture that we're called to stand up for those who don't have a voice, that we're called to stand up for those being oppressed and oppose their oppression and their killing, that God hates the shedding of innocent blood, that all human beings are made in God's image, etc. But one of the earliest Christian documents, the Didache, actually condemns abortion and infanticide in no uncertain terms. And so from the earliest point of the Christian church, abortion has been condemned. And it wasn't until fairly recently that Christians started supporting the practice of abortion.
Yeah, it irritates me, however, that abortion and pro-life are framed as a very religious ideal, that essentially if there was no religion, there would be no pro-life, because it's entirely a religious concept.
Yeah, and that's by design. That was an intentional falsehood by the pro-abortion lobby in order to get abortion legalized in 1973. Bernard Nathanson wrote about this in his book Aborting America. Bernard Nathanson founded NARAL, which is a very pro-abortion organization. He was the president of NARAL for a time, and he eventually became pro-life. In fact, I believe he became pro-life after he witnessed a fetus in an ultrasound, but don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's how it happened. He did an abortion on an ultrasound baby, on a baby through an ultrasound, and became pro-life through seeing it graphically. But essentially, he wrote a book called Aborting America, in which he talks about the fight to legalize abortion, because he was on the front lines of that fight. And one of the things he talks about was that they basically framed the fight for abortion as a religious issue. They got pro-choice, Christian pastors and priests to say that, we shouldn't force our pro-life views on other people and on women who want to have an abortion. And they essentially framed it as a religious argument, even before 1973, the pro-life movement were still using science and philosophy. Some theology were appropriate, but they were using primarily science and philosophy, because science showed in the mid 1800s that human life begins at fertilization. So we had that knowledge for, over 100 years when Roe v. Wade was legalized. So it was the pro-abortion, pro-choice lobby that framed the abortion issue as a religious issue. And of course, it was dishonest, but it got them the victory. So.
And you probably know more about this than I do, Clinton, but in doing some word research in the past, there's a word, I believe it's used in Galatians, and in that Paul's condemning pharmakeia, and did some research into the background on that word. And one of the primary uses was abortatives. Is abortion at the time in Rome was mainly done through a chemical process. It was a used process even back in the early days of the church. So this is something that, while I'm not entirely sure that he was using it in exclusively that context in this verse. It's something that was certainly going on at the time of the beginnings of Christendom. So it's a position that I think, like you said, we can say has been the Christian position all the way back.
Right.
All right. Also, one other thing to note: there was a lot of hooping and hollering after her mention of her choice. And I actually did some research into who these voices were that were hollering. One of the things yelled. It took me a few times listening. Someone yelled "preach" as a remark in the background, and it turns out a lot of these people they zoom into at the time, or the one who yelled "preach" was Tiffany Haddish, who apparently another actress who had recently condemned Georgia and decided not to film anything in Georgia after their law change.
Yeah, isn't it funny how Hollywood keeps boycotting Georgia, but they'll go and film in China and other places which have which are pro-choice, but like China forces abortions on women, and so they're definitely. China gets them a lot more money than Georgia does, probably, but they're not very consistent in how they condemn things, which I think was part of Ricky Gervais's point, that no one wants to hear any of the Hollywood elites, condemnations, because they're not consistent in how they condemn, humanitarian abuses.
That's very true as well. All right, I will pull this up. We'll play through the rest of it unless you guys see anything you want me to stop beforehand.
Yeah.
Look different than yours, but thank God, or whomever you pray to, that we live in a country founded on the principle that I am free to live by my faith, and you are free to live by yours. So women 18 to...
Did she just say faith?
What was that, Joel?
Did she just say I'm free to live by my faith?
Let's see. I'll rewind just a tad here. I definitely heard her thank God there.
Yeah.
Well, I was wrong then.
I am free to live by my faith, and you are free to live by...
Nope, you were exactly right. Free to live by her faith.
Mm-hmm. Well, then this probably goes back to this idea that, and then she says you're free to live by yours, and so this kind of goes back to this idea that you can do what your religion tells me to do, but you can't make me do what your religion tells you to do, kind of thing. So, and I think that may be the point she's trying to make here.
Yeah, I think you're probably on the right track here.
Yeah.
Yours. So women 18 to 118, when it is time to vote, please do so in your own self-interest. It's what men have been doing for years.
Because, as we know, women have only recently attained the right to vote.
It's what men have been doing for years, which is why the world looks so much like them. But don't forget, we are the largest voting body in this country. Let's make it look more like us. Tommy and Matilda, I can't wait to come home to you.
Big deal about abortion in such danger then. Sounds like she should be a lot more confident than she is. But the reality is there's a large number of women who are pro-life and believe that abortion is not permissible in most or all situations. So yeah, her whole speech is just pandering to the left.
Yeah, I would say so. And I mean, a lot of people have pointed out these kind of similarities here, but the irony of appealing to faith, appealing to God, all while she's holding this golden trophy / idol and appealing to the fact that, you know, her abortion is what's given her, you know, the fame that she's come to. I mean, the parallels there, someone shouting preach in the middle of the whole thing. Just an awful lot of stuff there that just churns your stomach the wrong way.
Well, I wonder if she changed anybody's vote after that impassioned speech and then telling us to vote
Probably not.
for women's rights.
I would imagine she, you know, everyone who agreed with her is just gonna still vote the way that they did, and everyone who doesn't agree with her is still gonna vote the way they were gonna vote before. I doubt she changed anyone's mind with that speech, which is, you know, heavy on emotion but short on substance.
True. You know, one thing I do want to throw in there, just you know, particularly as people watch this video, you know, I'm sure we'll get the response that, oh, you're three men, you shouldn't be discussing this anyway. So, you know, what do you do when you get that response, Clinton?
Oh, well, sometimes I go the Frank Beckwith route. I say, you know, I say, well, arguments don't have gender. People do. There are a lot of women who make the same arguments I do. So pretend I'm a woman and then respond to me on those grounds. Or you could go the Scott Klusendorf route, which he doesn't recommend. You could say, you know, Scott says when he recounts a time where someone said, well, you know, you're a man. You can't speak about abortion. And Scott said, well, how do you know I'm a man? And she said, well, you've got a deep voice. And he said, well, so does Joan Rivers. And so, yeah, but that's not really the best way to go. Yeah, I usually just, the best thing to do is really just to point out that they're making a fallacy called the ad hominem fallacy by essentially ignoring your argument based on an irrelevant characteristic. Now, you don't want to actually tell them that they're making a fallacy. You want to kind of illustrate it because, you know, they are probably not skilled in logic. So you'll want to,
or interested,
yeah. So especially on the abortion issue, which is very emotionally charged. So you'll just kind of want to say something like, okay, yeah, that's true. I am a man. So how does my being a man then negate my argument, which is that abortion is wrong because it intentionally kills an innocent human being? How does my being a man affect the soundness or lack of soundness of that argument? The reality is it doesn't.
I think that's a great response.
Thanks. Another way you can help combat that is that whenever you go out speaking on abortion, just make sure you bring some women with you. That way, if they don't want to listen to you because you're a man, you can just bring one of the women over. Because, you know, I have...
That works too.
Yeah, because that's a very common response. And I had one person actually basically give me the finger and say, no opinion, and then turn and talk to a woman and basically just ignored me the rest of the time. So it happens, you know. It's just something you just kind of have to, you know, brush it off your shoulders and move on. And, you know, the person that she did talk to was a friend of mine, and I was perfectly confident with her ability to, you know, have this discussion. So I just, you know, went about my day. Didn't let it bother me. But yeah, it's something that happens. You know, a lot of people tend to be a lot more reasonable, and once you point out that that you're being your gender does not affect your argument, they're usually pretty willing to continue listening.
I think that's, for lack of a better way of explaining it, I think that's another one of the big problems here. And I'm not sure how much you run into this, but I think one of the issues too, from excluding men from this discussion, negates a lot of the responsibility. And I think in her story, from what it sounds like, from what we can gather from this very brief narrative, is she's essentially indicating that whatever situation she was pregnant in before was not with someone who was able to step up and be responsible on their end of things. And I think that, you know, to take men out of this discussion entirely also negates the responsibility that men do have in that situation, because from a Christian perspective, you know, the man in the relationship should absolutely be involved in the responsibility for caretaking of that child. And in that scenario, then hopefully with a good partnership, it wouldn't have negated any of her ability to follow her dreams and make the accomplishment she had. Of course, you have to make some sacrifices for kids. You just do. But in a good partnership, that shouldn't have even been an issue at hand. And so to take this to be exclusively a woman's issue, it's taking away a lot of that responsibility, I think. And that's really dangerous.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And because as a pro-life person, I'm not looking to unfairly or unduly burden a woman with a child. I believe that men need to step up, be a man, and take responsibility for children that they create. But legalized abortion allows men to take advantage of women. It allows them to basically treat women as sexual objects and then threaten to leave if they don't go in and abort the child because they don't want that responsibility. So, number one, legalized abortion and the pro-abortion lobby do actually have the effect, unintended though it may be, of men not stepping up and taking responsibility for the children, and that leads to more abortions because, and a lot of times, the Guttmacher Institute has done research on why women have abortions, and one reason a lot of women give is that they didn't feel that they were able to raise the child on their own. If the man would step up and help her with the child, then a lot of women wouldn't have abortions. But legalized abortion gives men that safety net. If contraceptives don't work, or if they don't want to use contraceptives, there's always legalized abortion that they can just take care of the baby, and that way they won't have any responsibilities or any child support or anything like that. So that's one. Another is that there are a lot of men that are adversely affected by abortion. There are men who want the child, and the woman goes and has the child again, has an abortion against the will of the father, and that can really screw up a guy. And so by saying that abortion is just a woman's issue or primarily a woman's issue, it's basically negating all of the men who are harmed by the mother of his child going in and having an abortion. So by essentially claiming that men shouldn't have a say on abortion, it adversely affects women by allowing men to treat them as sexual objects, and it negates the real harm that's being done to men whose children are aborted.
Yeah. I mean, that's the consequence of arguing that that's just part of the woman's body until it's out of the woman's body, because as long as it's part of a woman's body and not an actual human being, which is half the father and half the mother, the father has absolutely no say on that thing that he created.
Right. Yeah.
Or co-created.
Well, gentlemen, any final thoughts before we close out for the night?
Okay, so Clinton.
Yeah.
Being both a music guy and a bioethics guy, can you please explain to me what the Ace of Base song, All That She Wants, is about?
I'm not very familiar with Ace of Base, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Do you happen to know the words off the top of your head?
Okay. Sure. It's the song is, the chorus is that, well, let's see. Basically, it's talking about a woman that gets up and she goes to the beach and she's trying to hit on a guy and take him home. And then the chorus is that all she wants is another baby, but then she's gone tomorrow.
I have heard that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really done an analysis of the lyrics. I have heard the song though. Yeah, all that she wants. Yeah, I've heard it. Yeah, so I don't know. I haven't done an analysis on it, so I can't really speak intelligently to what they meant by the song.
But honestly sounds like a woman who's seducing guys just to get pregnant, and then she's leaving them so that she can have another baby, which makes very little sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why a woman would want to do that, but
welfare queen.
Maybe, I guess. Yeah. Oh, they're the lyrics there. I can't see.
Yeah, so Jill's came up with a new segment for us where we can analyze song lyrics.
Oh.
So
There we go.
Yeah, that's about
We'll
half
have
of
to-
what I do in my head.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, I do know a number of pro-life songs. So, yeah, in fact, what I was pleasantly surprised to hear is that the 80s hair metal band Extreme is actually very much pro-life. And they've actually performed at Rock for Life organization or festivals.
Hey, is the March for Life coming up soon?
It is next Friday.
Oh, wow.
No, actually, this coming Friday. Yeah, I'm flying out to Maryland on Wednesday to stay with a friend, and we're going to go out to the March for Life on Friday.
Can you come see me briefly?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't your friend somebody I know?
Jody Ward?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We could go see you. Yeah, I'll send her a message and we'll work that out. Because
All right.
I'm flying out Wednesday, and then Thursday we should have. I don't know. I don't know what any of our plans are except for Friday and Saturday. Because Friday we do the March for Life, and we may do one or two things after the march. And then Saturday we are attending a Students for Life conference, which is in Maryland. So Friday and Saturday might not be available, but Wednesday evening or Thursday we might be able to swing that. So I'll let you know.
There you go, mentioners. If you want to meet a Mentionables meetup live, just reach out to Joel or Clinton, and maybe if you're in the Maryland area,
or if you're going to be at the March for Life in Washington D.C. on Friday, you might be able to find me there too.
That's interesting. I'll have to think about that. We could hang. It's going to be very cold, by the way. Extremely cold.
Yeah, I mean, this is my third year being there. So after 2 years, I've come to expect the cold weather. So I'm going to be bringing a scarf, bringing some gloves. I'm going to be bringing a heavy coat. So I'm going to be prepared this time.
It was around 20 degrees today. So
was it? Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Probably a good plan. Yeah, definitely very, very chilly.
Yeah, and
this way right
warm
now.
Shirts too. So yeah.
All right.
Well, with that, we will go ahead and end the live stream. Hope you enjoyed it. We're always open to take questions. So next time you see us live, dive in, throw a question into the chat, and we will take care of answering that live on the show. Hope those of you who watch this enjoy it, and keep on mentioning.